Martins.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the founder of hashtag team TDDCC, Neil Hinder.
That I was misunderstood.
You sound like a rapper.
I'm misunderstood. Maybe that's a good thing. But there's more to somebody than meets the eyes, right? Everyone tells a story. That story is going to change from one person to another, and how that actually works out. So, yeah, I think maybe misunderstood would be good this time. So we went to the doctor together, Charlotte and I, and they didn't ask me one question. I literally got ignored the whole time. Like, I wasn't sleeping at night. I was suffering from a lot of acid reflux as well. Like, the stress levels were massive. Honestly, my anxiety wasn't too bad, but the stress levels were huge. I was really struggling. And then the doctor just completely ignored me, right? And we're going through a period of time. It wasn't that long ago. It was 2018. And it was men's mental health is like really, really important. I'm at the time in the right demographic for the highest rate of male suicide. And one thing we don't do well at all is listen. Now, I'm a massive talker. You can hear that from now. I'm very passionate and I can talk for years. But listening is really key.
Martins.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Chapters, a story in the making of an individual. As always, I always have a special guest in the building. This special guest is a man that knows all about pain. It's a man that has gone through a series of issues and troubles with situations in his life, which I am hoping he's going to share with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the founder of hashtag team TDDCC, Neil Hinder.
Oh,
and the crowd is going wild. How you doing, sir? All good? Everything nice?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. JJ, yourself?
Not too bad, sir. Not too bad. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being on my show. So as always, I always start the show by asking people, if your life is a book, what chapter do you think you're in right now?
How many chapters is the book going to have? I don't know. Let's say just over halfway through, I'm hoping.
Okay. And what are you hoping the end will tell?
That I was misunderstood.
You sound like a rapper.
I'm misunderstood. Maybe that's a good thing. But there's more to somebody than meets the eyes, right? Everyone tells a story. That story is going to change from one person to another, and how that actually works out. So, yeah, I think maybe misunderstood would be good.
Okay, so to the people that kind of misunderstand you, what exactly do you think they misunderstand?
I think it's there's a couple of points. One being a male is in my generation. So I'm not saying that I'm old by a long shot, but there's a lot of frontage of, stiff upper lip Englishness of who we are. I'm putting on a brave face for most of the day. And then there's the area of me that's a lot more sensitive. And I'll say that really seedily, but mean it in a really nice way.
Okay, so which set of people actually? So I'm guessing your family gets to see the sensitive part, and a few of your friends, and everybody else is the guy that's misunderstood. So give me some understanding. Let's go back. So you were born and bred England, born in Swindon.
Yep.
Okay, and how many siblings do you have?
So yeah, born and bred in Swindon. Always lived in Swindon. And I've got one brother, and I'm the youngest of two.
Okay, can I explain the always talking back and being the chippy chappy, as they always say, which is all good. How was life in Swindon? What was the typical life growing up with your parents and your brother?
Yeah, so I'm not from a hard background. I'm not from anything. I'm not wealthy, but we weren't poor. My dad worked long hours, 60-hour weeks. Like, he was a factory worker. My mum was part-time until I was 13, 14 when she went full-time. So, I had a nice childhood upbringing, like everyone else, where there was like 20 odd kids in the street. We used to go out on our bikes, the type of stuff that used to happen in the old days before we stopped our kids going out. and wrap them up in cotton wool, that type of stuff, right? So yeah, I'm from yeah, I don't want to say privileged, but it probably was quite privileged compared to a lot, but not definitely not affluent at all.
So when did that sensitive side start going down? When did you start going from sensitive half and half to the misunderstood guy that you think that you are today?
I think obviously schools are a tough one anyway, right? For anyone, regardless of who they are and what they do. Teenage years are I don't want to say hard, but they are probably the hardest years that you have growing up, finding yourself, trying to fit in. Even if you don't want to fit in, you still got to have friends, right? You still need to have that element of a support network and people to rely on. So you need people around you. So school wasn't necessarily hard, but after school, finding my way through work at 16, full-time work, and I think probably starting to find some good friends around about 17, 18 that I probably are still my good friends now, if that makes sense. And having them with me, I'm just under 40 now. So they've been around for a long time. They know me really well. I've known my wife since I was 17. So yeah, those are key influences and important people in my life. And they would help probably shape me to a certain extent. And yeah, they would know a lot more about me than other people. You still got to have kind of I'm a salesman by trade, by blood. That's what I've done, regardless of what it's selling. It's selling life and stories and whatever you're peddling at that particular time. I'm used to that kind ofness of, you have the showmanship, and then you have your life, let people in a little bit, but don't tell everybody everything about yourself, because no one wants to hear that. You're there to talk and listen to that other person. So yeah.
So have you always, I guess you've always felt that you have to keep what you do for a living, what you do outside of your home, you have to keep that outside. And then you have to come back and be the loving husband that you are to your wife and kids, and loving father. I guess have you always felt that you always have to have the different, I wouldn't say personas, but different, you have to be a different guy at different situations?
Oh yeah, I'm like a superhero, right? There's work now and there's after
Yeah, I
work
can see it now.
And,
I can see the cape. I can see the cape that you're hungry for tonight.
but I think it's like anyone. So my wife is a nurse, and I was a nurse, but I would understand when she was at work and then coming home from work, because my nurse wife was definitely a lot more harsher than my wife is normally. So there's an element in of everybody at work having a facade, because you have to have that element of you don't want to let everybody into your innermost secrets. You can make friends, don't get me wrong, but you kind of that comes over time, right? You don't want to let everyone in on day one and they're like, oh, there's too much here, or we don't need that, we're just here for one reason and one reason only, right? It's work. That has to be built up over trust and time.
So you have known your missus since 17 years old.
Yeah.
She has handled whatever persona that you choose to be, and she's stuck with you over the years. So
yes.
how do you have been in sales in your career, and you are a mortgage advisor?
Yeah.
And how do you actually break into that? How did you break into that? Apart from the fact that you clearly can talk your way into anywhere.
Okay. So the mortgage advice thing. So I've known Charlotte Charlotte's my wife's name. I've known Charlotte since we were 17. We didn't get together until we were much older, but we went to school together and we knew each other when we were younger. And then we made a connection 6-7 years after school. Mortgages was a bit of a funny one. I used to work in fleet management and working with small companies. And then I was self-employed. It was about the time when consumer credit licenses were being forced upon to brokers.
Yep.
So I had a bet with Charlotte at the time that I could get a job if I wanted one, and she told me I couldn't, and I had to pay a certain amount of money. So I went and got a job, and that was how I ended up being a mortgage advisor, purely out of a bet.
Well, that's good. That's
to prove a point that I could get a job.
So are you? So I mean, we could place a bet now and say, you could be a UFC fighter and just not to lose it. So you don't lose the bet. You can start training, and all of a sudden you could be like start kicking ass and be on TV. It'd be good. It'd be good. It's good that she challenged you. You pretty much became a mortgage advisor by a challenge, pretty much. So
Yeah.
Okay. Would you say you're good with challenges? You don't like to lose. You always want to make sure that you don't end up paying your part of the bet.
It depends what it is, right? That was I want to say an easy bet. 2 of 1. That was just attending an interview and just telling them, well, like all interviews, what they want to hear, like the two lies in the ring, as it were. You know.
Okay. All good. All good. So you got married. When did you and Charlotte get married?
2010.
2010, and then you had your first kid.
Yep.
And your first kid came in
2000 and she's 9 now, so 2012.
2012. All good. And that was all good. First kid came, and then you had your second child.
Yeah, 2014.
2014. And then, so before we go into the third child, what we'll talk about is so hashtag team CCC, which is the discerning dad caring community.
Right.
Male Bereavement Support, you are not alone. So a lot of people don't know what that is all about. So, but before we go, how you actually started this or found it, what does hashtag team CCC, what do they do? Who are you, and who do you support?
Okay, so we're a charity that supports males through bereavement, and that can be bereavement of any loved one, friend, family, sibling, work colleague, or anyone really that you're having problems with. So we support them. We support them via an online forum or a befriending service where they can give us a call, and then we'll arrange a time back to them and talk to them and give that support that they don't necessarily have, or say the things that they can't necessarily say at home because they don't want to offend anybody, but they still need to circumvent and talk about their own issues and problems. It's not necessarily a counselling service from that point of view. It's more of a listening and understanding service that we offer.
Okay, so now that the listeners happen to know what TWDWC means, and then after your second child, you and Charlotte had a third child.
Yeah.
And just talk us through how the situation went and how that led to you finding this charity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so 2017, Saul was born. Charlotte was in hospital for a week before. She had excess fluid in the womb, and that meant she was extremely large from it, and we thought there may or may not be a problem. So we'd had previously to that lots of scans, lots of checkups with nothing in there. So Saul was born via a C-section on the 5th of October, and he came out like a normal baby and went straight onto the resus. I want to say like a little toaster, like a grill, to go straight on there.
Incubator.
With all the bits and pieces. They called in the emergency crash team, so they all came in and took him away. Sol spent three or four nights in the Swindon Hospital, which is where I'm from, and then we were transferred one night. The first night that we came home, he was still in hospital, but they asked us to go home. So we went home and called back at 2:00, and we went promptly to St Michael's Hospital in Bristol, where Sol spent 6 months of his life, pretty much, just under to on his journey in the NICU baby care unit. Sorry, my mind's a bit blank on it. So he went there. We went under the pretense of he had a extended stomach on that day, and he was having problems breathing. So he was already intubated in Swindon. He didn't breathe like a normal child had done.
At this point, had they actually told you what they felt was wrong? Had he been diagnosed?
No, in Swindon we had loads of different things. There was just potluck and guesses, really, which was a bit. I mean, we went for an absolute roller coaster, and I mean, I can't speak highly enough of the NHS in the UK and how much they did and how they worked with us. But they're amazing. So they didn't really know Swindon, so they sent him to the proper place, which makes it's going to sound bad, but it's not. They've got specialists in Bristol, and they're proper specialists that deal with this thing on a regular, really different things on a regular basis. So we got sent there, and from there, it took about I think that like the next day or the day after, they thought they knew what was wrong with him. They literally went, he's got this, this, and this. We've seen it before. We think he's got this. So what he did have was CCHS, which is congenital central hypoventilation syndrome. So for everybody listening that doesn't know, because there's only about 1,200 people in the world that usually know, it's a nervous system where you don't breathe properly. And the easiest way to explain it is when you go upstairs, you know, and you take a big breath, he didn't have that drive to breathe. So it was a difference to us. He could breathe normally when he was awake and stuff, but he didn't have that drive to breathe like normal. So when he went to sleep at night, he would have or in the days babies do, he'd have a ventilator attached to him as well, which meant he had a tracheostomy, and that little tube just come out your neck about that big. I think there's pictures on the website of him with it, and then the ventilator attached to him. So he had two for home. He had one in his bedroom and one we would take about as well, that we could walk about with him as and when he needed it, when he would go to sleep. So yeah, he had CCHS. So he was in there for that long. That took a few days to be done, and then I think we had to wait. He had a colon operation as well. There was a few other bits and pieces that went alongside with it, because when your central nervous system is going, evidently that comes from the bum upwards. So your colon and all your intestines and stuff all are made at exactly the same time. So people generally do actually talk shit. It's not their own fault. It's just how they were made it to begin with. That's what the doctors used to say. So it's a true story. So he had that. We got the diagnosis. We had the care package in place, which meant that we'd have nurse attention around the clock at night, so we could actually sleep like normal people.
All this was happening in the space of how long? And clearly, your missus wasn't working at the time. I take it you had to give up work just to
I gave up work. So, yeah, sorry. I mean, it's all over the place. So what happened was we got to Bristol. There's a charity called, oh man, why am I forgetting all the names? I feel under pressure now, but you'll link them anyway afterwards. Cots for Tots, that's who they are. They're right opposite the hospital, and they have a building where you can stay free of charge, and they look after you. So bearing in mind that you're away from your home, you're transported. I mean, in our case, it wasn't that far, but 40 miles every day is and to get there and back in a particular time is quite hard. Plus, he's a tiny baby. So they had to Cots for Tots. My wife was on maternity leave, so Charlotte was on maternity leave for 9 months anyway. I was a mortgage advisor, self-employed by that point. So yeah, I was a one-man band who really didn't have a clue how long I was going to be at the hospital for or anything else. So I gave up work because it just didn't make any sense to try and help anybody out from, you know, I didn't have the time and attention to be helping someone 6 weeks through their mortgage, or 6 months, how long it took. So I was like, no. So I gave up work. Charlotte was on maternity leave still. And she took a few months off when she came back as well with him. Sorry, what was the question, JJ?
I'm just trying to understand how you coped as a family. You had 2 kids.
Yeah.
And Saul was going through CCHS.
Yeah.
And you had to give up work. Your wife was on maternity.
Yeah.
And throughout that period, you were going shuffling between home and hospital.
Yeah.
Who was your support system? Who was your family support system?
That's a good question. So Cots for Tots helped us with accommodation, which was amazing, because they gave us, and they had like an ensuite room,
yep.
A little TV, but a place to rest our heads, and a big bed. Iris and Buddy. Iris would have been 2017. Iris was 5 and Buddy was 3. So Buddy doesn't really remember so much. He obviously remembers what happened, but doesn't know the reasons why everything was happening, what was happening. So for the first, for the first 3 months, we didn't really see the children at all. We were very insular. It was very hard because we didn't really know what was going on. We obviously didn't want everyone to get involved because there was a lot of personal stuff involved in that you're trying to deal with and understand, because you've been taken away from your nice, cushy life of having babies and knowing what you know, bearing in mind we'd already had 2, to this whole area of special care, a baby with complex needs, health needs, which won't be just for when he was born, they'd be through to his whole adult life and beyond. It would never change or get better. You would just cope differently as the years go through. So you're trying to deal with all these emotions of, oh, well, how do I cope? Who do I speak to? So there was a very good therapist in the hospital who was there. I made some good friends that were in the charity as well, because they had like premature babies. So you'd always have people coming in with different stories that, you know, and as you're in this shared house together as adults that aren't used to sharing space, you kind of end up talking and making friends. So we made some friends there. Charlotte was one of the longest people there to stay in the hospital, but we were very much realistic and pragmatic with our approach of what we were happening. Once we kind of got our bases sorted, got our heads around it, because man, it was a massive head fuck. Anyone that goes through any form of finding out from how your precious, tiny, beautiful baby is to, oh, there's something wrong, how that works, right? What does that actually mean? What does that mean for like 10 years time? What does that mean for a year, right? Having a baby is relatively hard work, but their needs are quite simple. They need to eat, change, love, and wash, right? They don't need much, just pick them up and change them. I know it sounds really easy, but like that's what the baby needs. It will tell you what it needs. So when you have a baby with complex needs, it's like, well, what else do we have to do? Well, we have to learn how to do a tracheostomy. We have to learn how to do CPR. We have to learn how to shout for help. Doing kick ties around the neck. How does the vent work? You know, all of these other bits and pieces that go along the complex care around it. I was quite lazy about it all, and that sounds really arrogant. I'm probably looking back, was one of my major pitfalls on it. Because my wife was a nurse, I took, I want to say, a back seat on it. She led it and told me what I needed to know, and I understood things from her. Because when doctors talk, they don't necessarily talk at you at a pace or a known, like that you don't know. And they would use longer words and longer terms because Charlotte knew most of the terms that they were using.
So they pretty much, to them, they were talking to a colleague, and to you it was difficult because you were like, huh? What am I doing at this point?
Yeah, and we were there so long, Jay. We were there for 6 months in the hospital. So you got to remember that we were like colleagues to the nurses as well. We were there for a long, long time.
You were
we
there
were there
for 6 months.
Yes,
and in this period, you were not working.
Yeah.
You didn't see your kids for the first 3 months, or you saw them off and on.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we were taking care of Saul. So you've mentioned the charity that has helped, that was very close to the Bristol Hospital. In terms of support, did you keep it a secret from family members or any other friends?
No, when we first got in, we're at the age of social media, right? So it's quite hard. So initially, obviously you're trying to deal with stuff yourself, but there's also the element of everyone wanting to know what's going on, and everyone's nosy, and it makes it easier just to put it out there, tell everybody what's going on. Initially, we didn't have any answers for like the first week, so there was nothing to tell anyone. But by the time we'd set up stall, I'd moved back to Swindon. Charlotte stayed in Bristol. I would look after Buddy and Iris, and then I would come up as and when I could to see Sol and help out with Charlotte, etc. We were like, I want to say a divorced couple, really. We weren't like living together properly. We would have like weekends up there. We'd see each other as and when we could, but we'd still talk every day. But it was trying to give that comfort to Buddy and Iris of what was going on, because you were telling children that, and they don't know, they know now, but they think that's the normal practice of having a baby. That's what happens. You go off to hospital, you have the baby, but you don't come home. Okay, and that was the norm for them. So even so now, Buddy was still, when we just had our last one, Otto, he was assuming that we'd be in hospital for more than a night, right? He's like, oh, so you'll be gone to Bristol for X, Y, Z, rather than you'll be home. No, we should be home. The last time was different because there was some issues we didn't know about, but we were trying to be prepared as much as we could. So yeah, our children are really resilient, and they build up this of what they believe is normal and opposed to what it is. But so after the 3 months, then we were apart. We would come up, but we had to do what we could in order to kind of have, like, I want to say our lives back, but so the children weren't left out. They were still at school, right? They still had their routines, and they still needed. Fortunately, our parents, both sets are still around, and they helped out a lot. Without them, it would have been a lot harder. We would have been kind of stuck of where we were. So that was good, but no one really understands what you're going through at that time. And being in a hospital, and that would be anybody with a premature or baby as well. The constant ness of other children coming in that are far worse than yours is horrific. Also, there's loads of other things that go along with it, and they're not charity focused at all. But there'll be questions that other people will be feeling and have felt as well. Like, my child's poorly. Well, he's not poorly. He's got complex needs. But there's mums out there smoking. There's mums outside the hospital drinking, and you're like, or you've got crack babies. And I know it sounds really, but like, their babies are fine, but my baby's not. We didn't drink, we don't smoke, we didn't do all these things. So why? You're like, so there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of emotions. There's, you feel very vindictive at the time.
So you were there for 6 months. So at some point, your wife, yourself, and the baby, you got to come back home to Swindon.
Yes.
Okay, and then so at that point, you were comfortable, and you and your wife were very comfortable in taking care of Saul.
Well, you say comfortable. So we got home after 6 months. Once we finally got signed off for the care package, we got signed off that we were confident enough to look after our own child.
Confident.
There's a weird thing, right?
Yeah.
But you're comfortable enough with it. So then you come home, and then you're like, shit the bed, what's happened? Because I'm in hospital before, right? And I'm in Swindon and Chelmsford, but there's a lot of little bits to support. There's a lot of things you don't do. Your kids aren't running around daily. You're not having to clean the house and do all the other bits. And then you come home and you've got the baby that needs a lot more attention. And there's a lot of things that go along with it. And you're like, wow, this is like a culture shock. And like, the first 2 weeks were horrendous. And I think most people that bring a baby home for the first 2 weeks, they're always hard anyway, because you change and you kind of forget that. And actually the first 2 weeks were very hard. So we had our care package was somebody would come in the house every night, and they would sit with him while he slept from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. I want to say, or 8 till 7. Every night they would sit in the room. The room's a little bit smaller than this one, and they would sit across the bed and just make sure he was plugged into the ventilator, etc.
So you mentioned that generally this is a syndrome that not many people have. A very small percentage that actually get this.
Yes.
What is the survival rate? Do people actually get to grow old or get older?
Yeah, so it was a hard one, because we had the conversations when we were in hospital with regards to are we doing the right thing? What is the right thing to do? The internet is a good place and also a horrible place, right? You Google anything online, and you Google your symptoms for a runny nose, and suddenly you've got a brain tumor. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can run away with what's on there. So the doctors obviously advise us to never look online, but that doesn't help, because I've got Google, and I'm gonna Google everything and understand everything. And so there's 1,200 people in the world at the time when Saul was born that had CCHS. So there's not many, but there's probably a bigger proportion born with CCHS that go undetected because of SIDS, cut death, where people wouldn't have known, and it's not really traceable. You're looking for a protein inside a chromosome which detects, it's the FOXP2, which is how you can detect whether the baby has it or not, and that isn't something that goes by that often. So we joined some support groups. We talk to people in America, adults. There's fully grown adults that have run marathons with it. So there's people that have sort of. It sounds like it's at the time your world comes crashing down. It does. Literally everything comes down on you it's stressful. You don't understand. I've gone from this ignorant person who has no idea about anybody dealing with anything with complex needs for their children or family members to being in that world. And it's not nice. It's rewarding of what you do and as you grow as a person, but it's not necessarily nice. It's not a path that people choose. It happens, and as a human, you just deal with it because you've got no choice, and you get used to it. So you're kind of figuring out what's the long-term prognosis. How is this going to work? How is this going to work with my other children? What are we gearing ourselves up to? Is it just going to be a full? Is it going to be a week? Is it going to be a month? Are we going to get to an adult? So, and to simplify it, yes, should be alive, should live to a ripe old age. And then, when he's an adult, you just have the problems of if you plug yourself in at night. It's like sleep apnea, right? If someone doesn't go into sleep, plug themselves that mask on for sleep apnea, they'll die because their airways crush in, right?
Yeah.
That's basically the same principle with it. So physiologically, he was fine. Like brain was fine, functioned like a normal child, could start to walk, could say words. The only difference was he would be plugged into a machine at night or when he needed to sleep. And that was down to us as adults to be able to look after him, to do that. Unfortunately, being human and very white and pale, his face would tell up 1,000 pictures, and you could tell where he was and how much he needed his ventilator into bed when he didn't, because he'd look blue because his oxygen levels would be different. As a healthy adult, you should be around about 97 to 98, 99% oxygen. He would run on 95, so he would always run a little bit less, which meant his levels were a little bit different, and his temperature would be a little bit colder as well. But it was very easy to tell because of his colouring and his mannerisms of when he needed help and when he didn't need help. It was more getting used to it and understanding that. But as a child, you kind of understand what they need anyway, because you look for feeding cues and all the other bits.
So eventually things went from chaotic to not being comfortable, and then you got the swing of things. You and your wife got the swing of things. You were able
Yep.
to manage things at home. So, um, at what point? So, for how long was Saul alive for?
So he came home in April, and he died in the February the year after. So he wasn't home a full year.
Okay. At that point, obviously, I'm not gonna ask you how you felt or how you were feeling, because clearly losing a child is nothing you really can't understand or empathize unless you've been there. However, at what point did you decide to start the charity?
Um, so Sol died in the February. I was off work March, April, May. I think I went back in June. I think in March time, or it might have been April time, one of the months anyway, we had to have a checkup with the doctor to make sure that we were okay. Because we were getting signed off for work, right? As you would expect, going through that much grief at that particular time. So we went to the doctor together, Charlotte and I, and they didn't ask me one question. I literally got ignored the whole time. Like, I wasn't sleeping at night. I was suffering from a lot of acid reflux as well. Like, the stress levels were massive. I want to say my anxiety wasn't too bad, but the stress levels were huge. I was really struggling. And then the doctor just completely ignored me, right? And we're going through a period of time. It wasn't that long ago. It was 2018. It was men's mental health is like really, really important. I'm at the time in the right demographic for the highest rate of male suicide in the UK, right? So I'm literally ticking boxes all the way through. And I've gone to the doctors and I've gone, I'm not sleeping, I'm struggling, like, and then just completely ignored the whole thing, which felt really bad. I'm like, well, I get my wife, like Charlotte's having problems, and which is fine, right? you're talking to her, but like me, you've just completely ignored it from start to finish. And that was quite hard. And then I was like, right, okay, there needs to be something from this. There needs to be better. We weren't given leaflets at the right time for, oh, you should go and get some help here, or you should go and get some help there. There was lots of other stuff going on at the same time that was prolonging things. So there was so much going on. It was just highlighting. I think I came home one day and I just made a post on Instagram. It didn't go viral, but it was pretty good traction. So from that point, I was like, right, I need to do something. Things got a bit later on with it. I'd done a vlog online for a while of how I was coping. It was kind of therapy for me from that point of just getting it out there and to other people. So I was just vlogging and just talking about my feelings and about what had happened and how I was feeling with it all at that particular time. And then we decided to go from just kind of helping to try and to set up something more official to help people. And then I think that took about a year almost to go to that point of actually setting up and going a full official and going down the whole registered charity route to try and go, right, actually, we are legitimately here. We know we're pro-male and only promoting that, and it's not particularly right in this day and age, but there is nowhere else to go. Sol was not young enough for us to go to baby loss groups. He wasn't old enough for us to go to children. He sat in a really awkward position of where we would get help from. I was told that I could go to SANS, but I would be the only male there. And I was told that beforehand. SANS is a charity to help people through the bereavement of loss of babies and children. So it was very much like, oh, but you will be the only male. And I thought, I don't want to know that. If I get there and I'm the only male, that's fine. But to be told, it was kind of like, I didn't understand why I was getting told, if that makes sense. To me, it doesn't matter. So
how much would you say? So growing up in a generation where man up was always the thing. You're a man, handle it, solve it. And generally, I think a long tradition of men having to, solution driven. Don't cry over spilled milk. Don't, find a solution, find man up pretty much. How much has that acted as a barrier in trying to get men to open up about bereavement? How much has that acted in terms of people actually finally stepping up to say, I have a problem, I've gone through situations. I mean, you felt ignored and felt, I have feelings too. How hard has it been for the discerning dad caring community to break that barrier with a lot of men?
It's hard, man. Like, you've got a couple of things in there. You've got one, I want to look after everybody, right? So my instincts kick in. I've lost my son. I've got my wife. She's going to need me. I'm hurt, crying. I'm sad, but Charlotte still needs me, right? I've got my kids as well. Like, the world doesn't stop. And the biggest load of shit that it is the world just doesn't stop. Like, the kids still get out of bed. They still want feeding, right? But that's a bonus for us because I've got that use of getting up every day and going, right, I've still got children. They want me, they need me. I'm not just in this absolute awful shit situation. I mean, I'm still going through it, but I've got a little bit of help, a little bit of normality, if that makes sense. And was quite nice from that point of view. But other people, I think more people were a lot more compassionate with me and understanding, because a lot of people have got a dad. So they kind of like go, oh, I couldn't imagine what it's like losing a son, etc. So there was definitely a lot more compassion. Men, I find, definitely struggle to get into that element of, I need to talk about it. But it's not just talking about the death, if that makes sense. So me relaying out to you the whole night of what happened doesn't help. Like, I mean, I can relay it out and I could relive it, but every time you relive it, you get stuck in that position. So it's about trying to get past of that. And you talk to people, and that's kind of the bit that everybody is I want to say stuck on, from a want of a better term, they're in that because they're living that much of bereavement and that much grief at that time, that getting past that stage is really, really hard, but really, really important to actually notice that I'm really fucking angry actually, because like, and I said to my dad, you should have died. Shouldn't have lost my son. Like, you should be dead. Like, he should still be alive. And that sounds really horrible, right? And I don't wish my dad dead at all. But he was the one that was like next in my world. It should, because he's the oldest, right? And I want natural order because that's the way that we're all about. So, my dad's amazing. He's always there, but he's definitely on that element of like, you know, back to work now. He was definitely a lot more compassionate because it was my son rather than I'd already lost my grandparents that year as well, and one of my friends had committed suicide. So it was a big wide open year of loss for me personally. But getting to that point of people wanting and needing to talk. So the idea of the service that we offer, as I digress elsewhere, is so people can talk. But it might be the fact that your mum's not listening. Like, your dad's but actually your mum's not listening to anything I say, and actually she's really annoying me. But that's quite a really big thing to happen. And you can't say, oh, mum, I'm really annoyed at you, like, because she's going through her own stuff, right? But actually having that area to vent to somebody about something else is still quite important to have, because other people are in their own grief at the same time. And a lot of people can try and take your grief, yeah? Like, oh, so I lost my son, but someone might go, oh, my friend lost their baby. And you're like, yeah, all right, I get it. Or, you know, the worst case scenario is it could be your brother or sister saying, I've lost my nephew. And they're trying to, I want to say, take your grief. It's not, they're going through it, but like, the grief is yours. You need it. And that can be quite hurtful for a lot of people out there that have gone through that. So there's a lot of, I don't want to say resentment to other people, but there needs to be a safe area to vent, because actually people don't understand everything that goes on as well.
Do you think it's with the discerning dad and
Yeah.
people of similar situations opening up to each other and talking about stuff? So it presents, you feel it presents a better environment, because if I'm talking to somebody that knows exactly how I feel, you tend to open up more. You tend to talk about things more. Do you?
Yeah, I'm just going to interject there. I think one of the earliest mistakes that I'd ever made is assuming that everyone had the same journey and they would know how I felt, or it would be the same, but it's not. It is, to a certain element. They have a better level of empathy, but actually most people wouldn't like it or allow you to say, oh, I know how you're feeling at the moment. Well, you don't, because that was my son. He was my best friend, or he was my only son. You had 3 children, or, you know, I was with my dad every weekend watching football. So I haven't just lost my dad, I've lost my football partner. Or, you know, I used to get to my mum's every day and see her. We'd watch Countdown. I mean, I know I'm stereotyping, but we'd watch like this or that. But there will be an element in there that was special to them, if that makes sense, that made that person that died more important than anyone else that's ever died in the world. And quite rightly so, because it's the grief that they're going through, right? So the journeys are never the same. There's a similarity and a common theme of the grief, the venting, the anger, the trying to get to a point of where it becomes normal and you can talk about it like I can, and you're not just stuck in one path, but there's a whole bit, but it's kind of understanding actually that person's got a different journey, and just saying, actually, talk to me about it. Talk to me about, oh, how you feeling because your dad's gone. What was good about your dad? You know, what would you want to say to him? You know, those are like the key elements, and just listening. And one thing we don't do well at all is listen. Now, you know, I'm a massive talker. You can hear that from now. I'm very passionate, and I can talk for years. But listening is really key. And just taking that moment to go, talk to me. And then just sitting back, and someone might want to rant for 5 minutes. They might not. They might just want to talk about something completely different. But the only thing they've spoke about is this horrible experience, right? The person that's died and the grief, but actually they just want to talk to you about football on Wednesday, like in the Champions League. They just want a bit of normality. So it's kind of having that element in there of some people wanting to talk about this or some people wanting to talk about that, and kind of just going, right, this is your space, be heard. We say that men need a space and whatever, but are we listening? And that's the key thing, is we're not most of the time. We're going, oh, here's your space, go and chat. But nah, you need to listen to what they're saying, because they're not always talking about what you think they were talking about. There's a lot of other things in there. And sometimes it's getting to that point of them to talk about death and to talk about that element and opening up. But that can take weeks, months, some people don't want it, and some people are all in and going, blah, and other people are, actually no, but I still want to talk to somebody about something else. I want to build that level of trust. It's everyone's different.
You mentioned you've gone through your journey, and everybody's journey is different. And
Yes.
you also mentioned that you have gotten to a point that you can talk about this as if it
Yeah.
was normal. So, but even if you've got to that point where you can talk about things as if it's normal, do you still relieve the situation? Do you still see it? Does it still get to you?
Oh man. So we just had his birthday. So I've got a ring on every day. So I replaced my wedding ring, which is now in his hand, with his ashes in his hand. That's why I was looking at it. So every day I think of Sol. I don't relive the incident every day. There are certain days where the day he died, I'll relive it, or there could be a smell that could trigger. There's triggers, right? Everyone has different triggers. So smell's one of the key things to me. And sometimes films as well. If there's something that I resonate with and I could just be triggered, I'm a lot more aware of them than I would be before. Because as soon as they happen, you're like, oh shit, man, that's awful. So I try not to relive, because it doesn't help. It just harnesses anger for the situation. And I get why people do, because they also don't want to forget minutiae details of that. I've got to the point where I'm happy to talk to people about my experience and about how I cope and what I do in order to do that, and trying to take a positive. And that's basically what I've tried to do, is take a positive out of the shit situation, right? My son's died, so how could I honor him and make my life seem more fulfilled, which is the charity, right? That's a completely selfish thing to do. Like, I'm helping other people, which is the idea, but the actual thing is a very selfish. I need to get some form of validation and something out of it. So there is a selfish element in there, which I'm fully aware of. I can talk to anyone about it, but I also don't feel comfortable talking to everybody about my issues. So there's one of the vlogs that I've done of how many children do I have, like, because if I just meet someone for the first time and I've got my kids with me, I'm like, I've got 3 children, right? But really, I'm like going into a whole realm of, I don't need to tell them when my son's died. He's still part of my life, right? He's still a tattoo on my arm, and he's a big part. We celebrate his birthday still, but not everybody needs to know. If they want to know, then that's fine. But I don't need to tell everybody when I first see them. But he is there. I think I've digressed from
we
what
get
you said.
we get back to the point of the sensitive and misunderstood guy, I guess, pretty much. And
Yeah.
well,
Because there's guilt with that as well, JJ, of not telling people that you've got 4 kids,
yeah.
because you've not forgotten somebody, but actually you just don't want to have that conversation, right? So you harbor that guilt of going, oh, I've got 3, but actually I've got 4, but I don't want to have that conversation with you. But then there's the guilt of, like, I should just tell everybody, because it's not a problem. I don't feel bad about it, but I don't want that person to then go and feel bad, because you're managing their expectations of it as well.
So
sorry.
No worries. You and Charlotte, you did have a third child, Otto, a boy.
Yeah.
And when was he born?
He was born last year, 2020.
2020. Okay, so
yeah.
One of those that you clearly kept busy during the pandemic.
He was already done before we had lockdown. So he was born a week before Sol's birthday. So I've got Buddy's on the 25th of September, Otto's on the 28th, and then Sol's birthday right afterwards, a week later. So there's a lot of positives and negatives of that area.
How do you? So I know your kids are still very young, but
Yeah.
do they understand that they're celebrating a sibling that they never will get to see again?
Yeah. So obviously, Harrison's buddy do, so he's got no idea. But he's only one; he doesn't have ideas
Yeah.
of like what he's eating. So, um, kids are amazing, and they're really resilient. Is a good word, but overused. People also wrap their kids up far too much. Like death is a horrible, horrible experience, but it's part of everybody's life, right? We're
Yeah.
all going to experience it at some particular point. Now, um, so Sol died. We came home. We told the kids. They burst out crying. This is a little bit of a funny story, but they burst out crying, which is fine. My mum's in the next room. They run running in. My mum already knew, but they running in to tell her as well, right? Just running in to tell her they had some really good news, right? And obviously my mum knew, so it was less of a shock. But imagine if she hadn't known. And then we live on the back of the school, so they run it to the back of the school, and their friends are there, and they just tell their friends as well. Like it's just common knowledge and stuff. They don't know they're not what any social norms are, if that makes sense. They just have this news that they've just lost their brother, and they want to tell people, and so they know when they're sad, and it's a really nice innocence to have them, and to go. It's a horrible event, and they cry a lot about it. We do talk about Soul, obviously, because it's part of our lives, but we don't not talk about it to avoid tears. We try and celebrate as much as possible a life that was lived, and quietly mourn the life that we should have had, um, with him. Um, so there's that. But when we were going through the whole funeral process, like um, but I'm not an advocate for any particular place, but the co-op gave some really good books on death, and actually like how do you deal with it? What do you tell your kids, and how should they deal with it? But these books should be given to adults, like because they're so like easy to understand, and at that time, like well, actually, I don't know what I want to say to my kids, or I don't know what to say to somebody else. But the book's just like there; it's designed for kids, but really, like adults should read it. And the co-op give it out, and it's just like a breath of fresh air. Iris's teachers don't know how to cope with her when she's upset and sad. Still, they don't have a clue because it's death and it's a taboo. And you're like, yeah, like if she talks about a brother that's died, because they will go to a sad place, and we draw on our sad places when we're sad, and then we go to that, and that's just human nature, right? Um, and if she mentions it, don't just disregard it because it's an important thing for her. Um, acknowledge it, and then she will move on. But there was no acknowledging. There was a lot of, oh, we just need to forget that this is actually happening, and we need to move on with like got school to learn, obviously. But actually, no, there's like some really really key bits. So kids are great. We included them throughout the whole process, explained to them everything. Then we got them to help pick songs for the funeral. Um, they've been involved, and actually they talk very nicely about Saul. They include him in the conversations. We celebrate his birthday. He had a birthday cake this year. We blew out candles. It would have been four, so we all blew out one each. So it's there's elements in there that we do that are nice as a family, and they know that he's never going to come back. But they think one day they'll see him. Um, and that's what they believe. They believe in heaven, and they want to have whatever they believe and what anyone in believes at a particular time, and then that's great, and that helps them through their childhood and gives them some reassurance of what's life. But they're very much more akin to shit. People die. Like I didn't go to my first funeral until I was probably 20. Like and they went to their brothers at about 4 and 6. So, but it's not good that they've been exposed, but actually it's very normal. And if you can normalize that good shit things happen to good people, then it becomes quite, I want to say, an easier life to live, rather than everything's going to be rosy for life, right? They know that shit days are going to happen, but good days are always going to be there. Positivity, right?
Oh, good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's hashtag team TDDCC, the discerning dad caring community. Male bereavement support, you are not alone. The mission statement is very straightforward. No man should feel alone. Together, we can help break down the barriers and stigma associated with talking about and dealing with bereavement. Well, it's unfortunate that you had to go through what you went through to get a service out for men, and that could help men actually talk and break the barriers, as you've said. But I'm sure a lot of men out there thank you for breaking the barrier and going against the tradition of a steep lip and all that. From what I see, as your chapter will continue to go on, don't worry, it won't be you won't be misunderstood. You'll be understood as the man that broke a barrier and gave other men a voice.
Fantastic.
How is before I let you go, in terms obviously you've mentioned your wonderful wife Charlotte. She
Mhm.
must be very supportive, taking care of the kids, letting you grind, letting you do your thing. Is there, in terms of more awareness to TDC, other than the website, what is coming up next for the charity? What is there for us to look out for?
Um, COVID put a massive stop on a lot of our social plans. So we initially offered befriending, and then we mainly went down to the forum route. But we do t-shirts, hats, badges. We try and spread the word in a way that's nice. Um, and we just, I want to say we're low key. We don't go over the top with advertising. We're here, and we're there to help. Um, but it's never a nice thing to advertise of what we do. You know, it's a good service that there, but we don't like to bring all of the attention all of the time onto us. So yeah, we keep it low.
Well, keep it low, but at least you still help people. Well,
Yeah,
thank you very much, Neil Hinder. It's been a wonderful time talking to you. Thank you for giving me your time. I do
fantastic.
in chapters. You're a friend for life, so at some point we'll
Oh,
come back and
thanks.
check on how things are happening, and hopefully it'll be a better chapter and better things to come. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Neil Hinder.